Good evening, and thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Wayne Lynch, sitting in this week for Neil Friedman. Tonight on Newsrap, the plot thickens in the story of Old Court Savings and Loan, some trouble with test scores in Prince George's County, a land grab controversy of sorts in Wyman Park, and Marjorie Holt calls a halt to her congressional career. We'll examine these happenings tonight with Wiley Hall of the Baltimore Evening Sun, Peter Kump of the Baltimore Evening Sun, and Sandy Saperstein of the Washington Post. But first, our focus for tonight. And this week, we're examining the homeless, people with no place to go. Most people believe that finding those people shelter is something society must do, as long as that shelter isn't in their neighborhood. And that's when housing the homeless becomes a difficult issue. Earlier, we talked with a homeless woman about her experiences.
2 years ago, I collapsed on the street, and I was taken to University Hospital, and I was in there for 4 days. And they had me on an IV and said I was suffering from malnutrition and dehydration. And I got out of the hospital. They told me to eat better, take better care of myself, make a point not to skip meals. And that night, the day after I got out of the hospital, I did not have a place to stay. The shelters were filled. And sometimes that happens. The shelters are all filled. I had to spend the night out in the street. It was in the winter. I almost caught pneumonia. I've been homeless off and on for the past 3 years. I left the job in '82 and was unable to find work, collected unemployment for a while, had some problems even collecting that, and then that ran out, had difficulty finding work, and there have been spells, that I've been without a place to stay. Even when I was collecting unemployment, sometimes I was out of place to stay because my checks were late a lot of the time. And it's frustrating, just the whole situation in general is very frustrating, because I know in my case I feel like I've tried to do things to alleviate it and to get myself out of it, and just haven't been able to yet. And I really think that there's a lot of apathy on the public's part as far as, recognizing the need for more training programs, for more, programs that would help people be able to get themselves in a situation where they can just permanently correct a situation that would lead them to homelessness. And it really is jobs. It's jobs, job training.
We're here to shed more light on the homeless issue is Pastor Joyce Galloway, director of Antioch Community Shelter, and also Maxine Grissett, who's the executive director of the Coldstream Homestead Montebello Community Corporation. One thing we might mention is that you saw the interviewee there silhouetted, not shown on camera. We did that purposely to keep her anonymous because oftentimes there's a stigma connected with being a homeless person. And I wanted to first talk to you, Pastor Galloway, about a quick summary of how many homeless are there in Central Maryland, how many beds are available for them, what kind of help is available to them quickly.
I feel that we have about 20,000 homeless people in Central Maryland and Maryland, throughout Maryland rather. And we have about 570 some beds, I believe, in Baltimore and throughout the surrounding parts of Maryland.
That means probably most of those beds are at capacity most of the time, based on those numbers.
Everybody is running a filled house every night. We're turning away people. Of the 20-some thousand people, I believe that statistics will show that we've only been able to help about 11,000 of those.
Pastor, what kind of people are these? Are these people that are black and white, young and old, or do they fall in some other kind of categories? What are they?
They're black, they're white, and they're all ages. I have experienced in my time of being in the shelter business all ages, even mothers with little babies in arms, which would make up a part of the homeless community. So right now there is no...
They're not just these old vagrants we see, or winos, or people like that.
I would say about 2% because the homeless population is growing, and it's growing due to jobs, the layoffs. Bethlehem Steel, SK Plant, and just recently the University of Maryland just continued practical nurses, licensed practical nurses, 105 jobs. And a lot of those women were head of households.
It strikes me that people like the practical nurses could you would expect them to be able to move in with their families. Are these people who don't have roots in Baltimore, or their families can't afford to take them, or what? What's going on?
Okay, first of all, we recognize that when you're from a poor family, especially a large family, it's just nowhere to bunk up. And a lot of the older people have moved into the senior citizen homes, so you can't move in there, you know. So it's really, part of it is not having families, because at one time, and I'm not saying that all homeless people are black, but at one time, homeless people, your families, everybody was in Baltimore because you lived in Baltimore. But now we're moving out. So a lot of people just don't have any relatives here, or if they do, nobody wants to take them in because either their lease won't accept them or whatever.
Well, now, at the outset, you talked about, on the one hand, we should house the homeless, but on the other hand, neighborhoods don't necessarily want those shelters there. Maxine, you were involved in a somewhat of a controversy in the Harford Road corridor over a shelter. Can you kind of quickly tell us what the situation was there and how it was resolved?
About a year ago, I think that it was brought to our attention that they had moved on Harford Road, and the neighbors got highly upset about it, and it was brought to our attention. And at that time, we went to Pastor Galloway and had a meeting or whatever, and there was quite a bit of problems with the stragglers out on the street all times of night or whatever. And from time to time, we had a talk, and we seem to have gotten it straight. I think the neighbors were upset about the fact that they couldn't just pull up their roots and move other places, and they didn't feel that it was fair to them to have to do so.
So no neighborhood wants to have these people around, do they? I mean, your neighborhood isn't any different than anybody else, or wasn't?
You know, it's not just the homeless, though. Again and again, we have group homes for the retarded, group homes for juvenile services, juvenile delinquents. Every time you have one of these group home situations, the neighborhood objects to it, at least initially. And it's almost as if society made a decision a couple of years ago to deinstitutionalize a lot of the people who were being locked up in hospitals and prisons, and yet you made the choice on one side, but you didn't have that acceptance on the other side.
Maxine, did the nightmares come true? The things you were afraid of would happen?
From the beginning, they did, but like I say, once we brought it to Pastor Galloway's attention, it has gotten a lot better. I mean, I would even say that you really don't know they're up there now.
Yeah. What were the problems at first?
A lot of people was being called out of their names by them because they wouldn't give them a quarter or a cigarette, things such as that, you know.
How did you stop that, by the way?
Well, first of all, homeless people comes in all types. I mean, you could be a decent person walking down in a harbor, and some bum will stop you and want a cigarette or want a quarter for some wine. So I feel that, for the most part, homeless people are no different. We have some that maybe discredit homeless people, and we have some real good, honest, and decent people that happen to be homeless.
Well, putting a shelter, a roof over their head is one thing. What about getting them ready to go back into the mainstream? What can you do for them?
Okay, it's not enough, and that's one reason why funds are needed. Okay, what we try to do is stabilize them first by taking the trauma out of the fear out of them, where you're going to sleep tonight and that type of thing. And once we settle them down and get them in there, then we start working on job situations, referring them to different clinics if that's needed. We have a referral system, and we try to direct each family or each individual to what we feel is necessary for their immediate needs.
All right. Good luck in your work. Thank you very much, Pastor Joyce Galloway from Antioch Community Shelter and Maxine Grissett from Cold Stream Homestead Montebello Community Corporation. I'll get it out. Thanks very much for being with us tonight, and we will be right back with more News Wrap in just a moment.
Smithsonian World invites you to cross the distance with host David McCullough.
That's what this hour is about. Some of the brave and ingenious ways devised to get from one place to another.
Take a journey through the world's greatest shortcut. See how a design revolution streamlined an entire nation and relive the aviation adventures of Anne Murrow Lindbergh. Next time on Smithsonian World.
Journey to the Panama Canal and the Moscow Zoo with Smithsonian World, Monday night at 9.
On August 6, 1945, the world gained an atomic bomb and lost its innocence.
The first reaction was, thank God it wasn't a dud Up to then, I don't think I'd really thought of all those flattened people.
40 years later, in a 3-hour PBS special, the scientists and the survivors remember Hiroshima.
MPT commemorates the 40th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, Tuesday night at 8.
Well, the state called it the largest financial fraud in Maryland history, and it filed a $200 million lawsuit against Old Court Savings and Loan and the people who were running it, and Peter Kump. I guess they decided they're going to go for the dough before it got away, I guess, huh?
Well, I think that's what the state is doing. It's just not the big bucks that they got slapped for, but what the state is really trying to do is to freeze all the assets and all the money that was in Old Court and seems to have dribbled away. Now, these are accusations, allegations, but what the state is doing through the conservator, the insurance fund that Maryland Insurance Fund is running, they're calling it a wholesale theft of assets. They're calling it, these people have used it for a private slush fund. They're saying this is the tip of the venal iceberg. These are all in the court documents. Blatantly raiding Old Court. And to spell it out in 47 pages, they listed, for example, some of the fees, commissions, and other things they say were totally undeserved that went to Jeffrey and Cora Levitt, $8.3 million, Alan Rosemary Pearlstein, $2.3 million, Jerome Codden, $1.3 million. These people, if the state's case is right, were just helping themselves, enriching themselves.
You know, the state says all this, but the thing I keep listening for is some demand for public disclosure in banking. You know, I mean, if the state of Maryland is going to have to bail out banks like this for millions of dollars, then we ought to know what's going on. I think the public has a...
Well, I think, yeah, but there were some bills in the legislature. They were defeated.
That's right.
The savings and loan were against this thing. They said it was unnecessary. After all, they were good, honorable people, right?
I bet they would be against it.
The climate will change now?
Boy, I think the climate is going to change.
Very heavily.
And the political ramifications is going to change. And we're all going to be taking a look at this thing because we still don't know. You see, the key to this court case, which comes up Monday, is can we save some of these assets, have some of them dribble away? Because at one place they specifically say that all of these people, there are 26 defendants, 12 individuals, 14 corporations and partnerships, account for everything you ever got out of Old Court. Where did it go? Where is it now? That's what they're trying to do.
Why do we just have a civil lawsuit now? Why don't we have anything criminal?
We have a criminal one.
Yeah.
This is to freeze the assets. On the other side of it, we've got a criminal case going. We got a combined state and federal investigation. So we got the U.S. Attorney, the feds, FBI and all that, right? And then we got the Attorney General, Steve Sachs and his group. They've combined together 2 grand juries, and Mr. Sachs said this week, 50 subpoenas are out. So the ball is rolling on the criminal side.
Peter, what do you think the chances are that any of these distinguished gentlemen will serve some jail time, maybe at the Maryland Pen?
Well, you know, I'm not a legal expert or anything like that, but I have heard that somebody's got to pay for this thing somehow or another. But I leave that to the courts and the lawyers. Let's not prejudge things. I mean,
how long is this going to be before we see some results on this grand jury?
Months.
Long time?
Months, yeah.
How about on the civil suit? Will that move more quickly, or will that drag on?
The judge has to make a decision fairly quickly on the request to freeze these assets. The state is pushing this thing. So next Monday, 9 o'clock, 6th floor down in the courthouse, the judge will start hearing this. And I don't know how quickly he's going to rule on it, but I think that the state has to show, I mean, this is an unusual request, unusual legal request. The state has to show that there is plenty of a case there. And they have revealed all of it. We are merely touching on some of the aspects of this thing. They took 3 specific cases and spelled out in detail. They said the Byzantine turnings, you know, money going into this corporation, that one, back, forward, this way, that way, you know. So it's complicated.
They obviously were afraid that these guys would disappear, right?
Well, I don't know what they're afraid of, but they're asking for everybody to stay. So, you know, you have to make your own judgment.
We should strike a blow for the other side. Jeffrey Levitt's attorney, Paul Sandler, called the whole thing, the whole lawsuit, unprecedented. unprecedented, unfair, and improper. So I guess.
Well, I guess it is unprecedented on that side, but it may be unprecedented in the amount of funds that are also going in the other way. I mean, I don't think it's very precedented for bank owners to take $8.3 million in fees, commissions, and the like.
Have they denied all of this?
Well, they haven't said anything yet.
Well, let's talk about some arithmetic of a different kind on Newsrap tonight. It's not too good, in fact, in Prince George's County, because some recent standardized test scores show that the black students in that school system are scoring 20 points lower than their white counterparts. Quite a gap, Sandy. Why?
Okay, well, first of all, you've got to remember this is an average, and the first thing that the superintendent out there, John Murphy, says is this has nothing to do with inadequacies of these students or their ability. They're talking, again, not surprisingly, about socioeconomic problems, that a lot of the black students are the poorer students, and it's problems like that, and also about something I found real interesting, these lower expectations on the part of the teachers, that the teachers expect less of the minority students, and therefore they get less.
Sandy, but isn't this really an unfair kind of a thing? Here you say the black students are 20% behind the whites, and yet if you take some of the individual black schools, they're doing damn well. They're back up there with whites.
Okay.
And some others are doing lousy. So, you know, in a way, this is turning all black students saying they're doing a lousy job, when some of the kids down there and some of the black schools and black teachers and black parents are working like hell and doing a good job.
The point is not to tar anybody. The point is to use it diagnostically. Bonnie Johns was worried about that, a former school board member out there, very much an activist woman, and she says if this is used to sort of underline and say these students are inadequate, we're in trouble. But if it's used diagnostically to do something, the fact is, in the aggregate, these black students are doing 20 points less than their average.
But if they take the schools that are doing well, then they should be able to find out, you know, how to move the others up. And I think some of the schools down there, for example, where you have a little more disciplined head master or mistress, you know, a little more care, a little more attention by teachers, where some of the teachers have actually gone to every single kid's home, talked to the parents and said, hey, get them to do their
talk about higher expectations, that's quite a difference on the part of the teachers. I think that's what he's talking about, is going to the principals and teachers, and that's the goal.
Yeah, one of the disturbing things about this, not this study, but there have been studies at almost every level that show that black students in college, in high school and college, and across the country, it's almost an across-the-board phenomenon. And there, I think you can't put the blame then on let's say that certain students had strong parents, because that isn't true certainly in a college situation. If a student has done that well to get to college, and yet he still performs consistently lower.
What do you think it is?
I think that there have been some very good studies showing how teachers actively discourage learning in black students. I mean, you know, they would do things, for instance, if they ask a question, they actually time the amount of time a teacher allows a white student to respond versus the amount of time they allow a black student to respond. And they have consistently found that that a black student, you know, if he hesitates for a second, they say, oh, you don't know, and they go on.
This expectation thing, I'm going to tell you about a study that Harvard did, having nothing to do with blacks and whites, but having to do with, they took some elementary school students and they switched their records sort of on the teachers and gave the students with good records in the past poor performance records from the past, and vice versa. And then the new teachers thought these students were bad students. And those students that year did worse than before. And the students who were given the falsely good records did better. And you have to believe that that's the reason.
What's PG County going to do to close this gap, Sandy?
I think they're talking about raising the expectations, going in and meeting with principals and saying you have to get your teachers who are not doing this intentionally to change it. And I think they're going to have to, they haven't talked about this yet, but I think they may have to go into the homes that we're talking about.
Said than done.
Very much.
Well, let's have a little fun talking now about the Battle of Stony Run. Wiley Hall, the folks in Wyman Park don't want the city and Johns Hopkins University to kind of do a tag team on them and expand the area there. I kind of find it ironic that Mayor Schaefer, who has pushed neighborhoods as one of Baltimore's strengths for a long time, has taken some heat from neighborhoods. Locust Point on the firehouse, the northeast area on the ice rink, and now here we go with Wyman Park. What's the deal there?
You know, it's almost as if the mayor's strengthened neighborhoods and strengthened their self-concepts, and now he's maybe paying the price. In the Hopkins area, or the Wyman Park area, the city has launched a broad-based scheme that they call privatization, and what they mean is they would like to turn over city-owned parks and lands to private agencies or private groups, and they hope to save money and upkeep and maintenance, and they hope to better use that land. So they made such an offer to Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins thought about it and said, yes, you know, we can use that for research facilities. Wyman Park community says, look, that's a beautiful park there, and we want to keep it that way. And that's where you have the conflict.
So who's at fault? The city, not the university, on this thing?
Well, who's at fault? I don't know. I mean, because
this was dumped on the community pretty quickly. It was just sort of like that. Yeah. It was going to happen. You know, I think that was one of the complaints. No one went to the community and said, look, we've got problems. We'd like this institute here. This means jobs. This means progress. This means development. And we can fix it up so it won't be that bad. No one did that, did they? I mean, you know, just...
you know, I have a theory, and it's only speculation, but I think that Johns Hopkins and the city may have underestimated the residents, the community's concern about Wyman Park. That's an area that's very, in my opinion, very overgrown. It's been hard to maintain, and there's not a lot of traffic down there. And so I think they just looked at that as fallow ground, and I think they sort of felt that any development they made would be an improvement.
But Wiley, doesn't the university also need some space, because they are a little hemmed in? If you're going to put in some pretty classy institutes, wouldn't we lose out if we didn't, you know, fix it up somehow?
You know, I think what we're faced with is a really basic issue, the jobs and the development that Hopkins could bring in.
But they could put this somewhere else, though, Wiley.
Yeah, but you know, they could also put it outside of the city limits. Hopkins owns some land outside in the other counties, and that would certainly not be to the benefit of the city.
Are these jobs going to be for these people in this community, or no, they're not? They're going to be for a bunch of professors and...
Yeah, although this is a fairly highbrow community.
Yeah, but
they've
still,
already got good jobs.
Yeah, when you say jobs, what are you talking about?
When they put in the thing... They put in the Space Institute. I sold a house near there 2 blocks away. Moved out to the county. Did very well.
Mayor Schaefer doesn't want to make anybody mad right now, does he? Or
well, you know, yeah. I think you're right, especially this group, because they're the type who contribute to campaigns.
Well, speaking of politics, maybe we ought to turn our attention now to what may turn out to be a jump ball between basketball star Tom McMillan and a Maryland delegate by the name of Robert Neal for what will be the vacated 4th Congressional District seat of Marjorie Holt. And Peter, I guess the rumors were finally turned into reality. There's a lot of talk about Marjorie stepping down, and she finally did it.
Yeah, and I think if we had all noticed it, she probably has been getting ready to do this for a long time. You know, she dropped 2 out of her 3 committees. She stopped going to a lot of meetings. She's going to be 65 before the end of the year. She's had 7 very successful terms.
How did she last so long in a district that's so overwhelmingly Democratic?
Well, I think let's give the gal her dues. I think she had good constituent services. Maybe she wasn't as flashy and as glamorous as some others, but she kind of kept after problems. She appeared at meetings. She did her homework.
She's never had any tough competition, has she?
She hasn't had any tough competition.
Well,
okay, that's another one.
That's true. We're beginning to see the writing on the wall, the winds of change. I mean, you know, there are members of Congress who practically have to be propped up to
not
vote.
Practically.
Yeah, you know. Do you think she was beginning to feel that each race was going to get harder and harder?
Well, I don't think her races were getting harder and harder, but I mean, you know, that's a tough job. And she told me once a few months ago that drive down from Severna Park down to Washington gets tougher every day, and it does. And I think she's been a very able politician, and boy, the Republicans are going to miss her. Now,
what about the future?
Or the future,
yeah.
Okay. On the Republican side, Bobby Neal has been endorsed. Bobby's the minority leader in the House. He's been endorsed by Mrs. Holt, and I think that puts him in front. But there's some others who may run, including Bob Pascal, former county executive, former All-American football player from Duke.
We get a football versus basketball.
We might even wind up with a football player against a basketball player. McMillan seems to be the lead. Now, leading Democrats like Jim Lighthizer, like Warren Duckett, the state's attorney, and Jim, of course, the county executive, have told him that they won't run against him. And so there may be sort of smaller opposition. On the other hand, Duckett now is saying he may change his mind. McMillan is often running. As a matter of fact, he's been running for about 2 years.
Fast breaking, you might say.
Well, not that fast.
Not quite. Well, he has
Anybody
that,
along,
he has that
you know.
Jack Kemp, Bill Bradley, jock charisma.
No,
in a sense.
right.
No, I
Remember
wouldn't call
this.
it charisma.
One football player, Jack Kemp, is running for president on one side, and on the other side, a basketball player from New Jersey is running for president on the Democratic side. So maybe Maryland ought to join the club. And we have it both ways. We got a football player and a basketball player.
I have to disagree with this charisma business. I think
Charisma.
that Bobby Neal versus Tom McMillan is like, you know, Mr. Personality versus Mr. No Personality. I just think McMillan... Bobby Neal's an engaging guy, bright, charming.
Yeah, Tom McMillan?
Yeah.
And you go like this.
It's very hard to hear anything. No,
He's 6 foot 11 and a
Stands out in a
half,
crowd, Peter.
That's true. That's
for
true.
sure.
The reporter called him up about this thing, you know, when Holt made the resignation, made the fact that she wasn't running public finally, and said, well, what can you tell us about your plans? And he made some kind of comment about, well, it really wasn't on my agenda to talk about this yet. So he missed getting all the press that he could have. He missed making any comments.
Come on.
Bobby
Well,
Neal, on the other hand,
when somebody is just announcing a resignation, I would tell any politician, for heaven's sake, hold your fire and say, God, what a great woman she was and all that. You
But
know.
he didn't say that either.
We can't get away tonight. We can't get away tonight without talking about the big topic of the week, which is coming out of Ocean City, some storm clouds brewing over there because of the weathermen, the local radio TV weathermen, saying that the Ocean City forecast is partly cloudy instead of partly sunny. And Fish Powell, taking a chapter from Harry Kelly's book, said you can't do this to us, guys. You've got to say it's sunny, it's positive, it can't be negative, it can't be cloudy. We want to get people down to Ocean City. What do you think about that? That's a little strange.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. Who wants to fight the bridge crowds, all that traffic?
Right.
Who likes those, you know, that scenes anyway? I would tell everybody, stay in Baltimore City and have fun. You're better off here on this side of the bridge.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me very much of the debate in the UN a couple of years ago, maybe last year, over the definition of the difference between freedom fighters and terrorists.
Well, all I know, do you know what the difference is between partly cloudy and partly sunny, or are they the same
I would
to you?
rather them say partly cloudy because then maybe less people will go across the Bay Bridge, as Peter said, and there'll be more room for me. Right, I can get there
She wants to
faster.
be there.
That's right.
Well,
Yes.
And I'll know that it really will be partly sunny.
as the sun sets over Ocean City tonight, we're out of time, and we thank you for joining us on Newswrap. Neil Friedman back next week. I'm Wayne Lynch. Have a good night, everybody.
Errol Flynn stars in the adventure film Kim, just 30 minutes from now, here on MPT. Stay tuned for a Grunskin Company next.
Newswrap is made possible by Waverly Press Incorporated and the Williams & Wilkins Company. By Maryland National Bank. Maryland National Bank is helping the region to grow. And by the members of Maryland Public Television.